Ernest Shackleton is writing a letter to his wife. It is late in the year 1914. He is sitting at a wooden desk in a Buenos Aires hotel room. His ship is 2 weeks from leaving for Antarctica. And the sentence he writes, one sentence, no fuss, almost offhand, is this. This ship is not as strong as the Nimrod. The Nimrod was his last ship, his good ship, the one that had almost carried him to the South Pole 6 years earlier. This new ship is called the Endurance. He seals the envelope. He walks down the dock. He climbs aboard. He sails south. Within 6 months, the Endurance will be frozen solid in the Weddell Sea. Within 10 months, the ice will have crushed her hull. Within 11 months, she will slide beneath the surface and disappear for 107 years. And for 107 years, the story told about her will be the same. The ice was unbeatable. The ship was sound. The tragedy was nobody's fault. In October of 2025, a Finnish engineer will open the original blueprints of the Endurance. And quietly, across one published paper, he will change that story forever. This is a story about a ship that sank because of a decision made months before she ever met the ice. It is a story about one of the most celebrated leaders in exploration history, and the one compromise that shadowed his greatest survival feat. It is a story about 634 days on ice, 800 miles in an open boat, and 36 hours walking across mountains no human had ever crossed. And it is a story about a detail so small, so structural, so buried in the wooden ribs of a hull that nobody saw it for a full century. If you think you know the Endurance expedition, the frostbite, the James Caird, the miraculous survival of all 28 men, stay with me. Because the reason all of it had to happen is the part history forgot. The ship we remember as Endurance was not originally called Endurance. She was launched in December 1912 at the Framnes shipyard in Sandefjord, Norway. She was named Polaris, and she was built for a very specific job. Not exploration, tourism. She was designed to carry wealthy European travelers on Arctic hunting cruises, polar bear safaris, summer trips, the kind of voyage where the ice parts politely in July and recloses in September, and no one asks the ship to survive a winter. Shackleton bought her in 1913. He had just announced the Imperial Trans-Antarctic expedition, 1,800 miles on foot, across the coldest continent on Earth, sea to sea. Amundsen had taken the South Pole. Scott had died coming back from it. There was only one prize left in the heroic age of Antarctic exploration: the crossing. Shackleton had 8 months before his expedition was supposed to depart. 8 months to buy a ship, modify her, crew her, provision her, and sail her to the bottom of the world. He did not build a new ship. He bought Polaris. He renamed her Endurance, after his family motto, "By endurance, we conquer." And he did not ask the shipyard for the one reinforcement that might have saved her. 3 years earlier, in 1911, Shackleton had been asked to advise a different polar ship. She was German. Her name was the Deutschland. She was about to sail into the same Weddell Sea he himself would later enter. Shackleton looked at her plans, and he wrote back with specific advice. Add diagonal crossbeams to reinforce the hull. Brace the engine room. Ice pressure doesn't push straight down. It squeezes sideways. A straight-beamed hull will collapse inward. A diagonally braced hull will hold. The Deutschland followed his advice, and when she hit ice in the Weddell Sea, she held. Now, 3 years later, Shackleton is standing on the deck of his own ship, a ship with a longer engine room than normal, a ship where only one crossbeam spans the full width in that region, a ship with no diagonal bracing at all, a ship that is, structurally, a cousin of the Deutschland, but without the advice he himself had given. He knows. His captain, Frank Worsley, will later write that the engine room was the weakest part of the ship. The crew physicist, Reginald James, will write in October 1915, as the ice closes its fists around them, this exact sentence: "The pressure was mostly along the region of the engine room, where there are no beams of any strength." Shackleton knew, and he sailed anyway, because the expedition was funded, because the press had been told, because the war was coming, because the crew was already hired, because he had 8 months. He traded one perfect ship for one boat leaving on time. December 5th, 1914. Endurance leaves the island of South Georgia and sails into the Weddell Sea. 45 days later, on January 19th, 1915, the ice closes around her. She does not sink. Not yet. The ice lifts her up, cradles her, and holds her. On February 24th, Shackleton walks out onto the ice with his captain. They look north. They look south. They look at the horizon in every direction. There is no open water. Shackleton turns to Worsley. He says, "We will winter here." The ship becomes a home. The crew becomes a village. Frank Hurley, the Australian photographer, takes glass plate photographs that will later become the most famous polar images in history. Tom Crean, the Irish seaman, cares for the sled dogs. Harry McNish, the carpenter, keeps the cat he calls Mrs. Chippy, though the cat is actually a boy. 9 months pass, and all the while the ice is turning. It is a gyre, a slow clockwise current. It carries the ship hundreds of miles. It squeezes, it releases. It squeezes tighter. The engine room, the weak part, the part Shackleton knew about, begins to groan. On October 27th, 1915, the pressure reaches its peak. The hull cracks. Water comes in. Shackleton gives the order, "Abandon ship." The crew, all 28 of them, plus the dogs, plus Hurley's photographs, plus 3 lifeboats, steps onto the ice. On November 21st, the Endurance slides beneath the surface for good. They are 1,000 miles from the nearest human being. Before the ice march begins, Frank Hurley goes back. He dives into the freezing hold of the half-sunk Endurance. He retrieves 500 glass photographic plates. He crawls back onto the ice with them, and then he and Shackleton sit down together on the ice. The plates are too heavy to carry. Every pound matters now. They will need to choose. They select 120, and then, this is the part that tells you everything about Shackleton. They smash the rest. They do not set them aside. They do not hope. They destroy them, because Shackleton understands something about human beings on ice. If you leave the rest behind, someone will want to go back for them. Someone will take one more step than they should. Someone will die for photographs. So they break the glass. For 5 months, the crew drifts on an ice floe that is slowly breaking apart. On April 9th, 1916, the ice cracks. They launch 3 lifeboats into the stormy gaps between floes. 7 days later, after rowing and sailing through freezing spray that builds on the oars, through pods of killer whales, through seas where salt water burns open skin, they reach a place called Elephant Island. It is the first solid ground any of them has touched in 497 days. It is also uninhabited, unvisited, unreachable by rescue. Shackleton makes the decision he has been saving. He will take the largest lifeboat. He will take 5 men, and he will sail 800 miles across the most dangerous ocean in the world, the Southern Ocean in winter, to the whaling station at South Georgia. The lifeboat is 22 feet long, open, wooden. He chooses Frank Worsley for navigation, Tom Crean for muscle, Harry McNish to modify the boat, John Vincent, Timothy McCarthy. The carpenter builds up the sides with canvas and sledge runners. They pack biscuits, water, a sextant. On April 24th, they sail into the Southern Ocean. For 17 days, Worsley cannot take a navigational fix. Storms cover the sun. He navigates by dead reckoning. Feel, memory, the angle of waves, toward an island 100 miles wide in an ocean 1,000 miles across. On day 15, briefly the sun breaks through. Worsley raises a wet sextant in a pitching boat. He shoots 4 readings. And he is still on course. On May 10th, the James Caird scrapes onto the beach of South Georgia, on the wrong side of the island. The whaling station is over a mountain range no human has ever crossed. Shackleton, Worsley, and Crean have been awake for weeks. Their clothes are ice. Their boots have had screws hammered through them for traction. They begin to climb. 36 hours later, without sleep, without tents, without rope for most of it. Without food they haven't frozen. They walk into a Norwegian whaling station and ask, in English, if anybody speaks English. The station manager will later say he did not recognize Shackleton. He thought the 3 men were beggars. And that is the moment the rescue begins. It takes Shackleton 3 more attempts to get a ship back to Elephant Island. The first 2 are blocked by ice. On the third, the Chilean government loans him a tug named Yelcho. On August 30th, 1916, he reaches Elephant Island. He has been gone 130 days. The 22 men he left behind, living under 2 upturned lifeboats on seal meat in temperatures that froze eyelashes to cheeks, are all alive. Every man of the Weddell Sea party comes home. Shackleton remains the only expedition leader of the heroic age to have brought every man back alive from an Antarctic failure. But here is the question the Finnish professor's blueprints leave us with. The survival was miraculous. The leadership was legendary. The seamanship was, quite literally, unparalleled. But what exactly was being recovered from? Not only the cruelty of the ice, not only the size of the sea. Also, and this is the hard part, a decision Shackleton had made 18 months earlier in Norway, at a shipyard, when he declined to install the diagonal crossbeams he himself had recommended to someone else. The greatest rescue in exploration history was also, quietly, a debt being paid. A man spending 2 years of genius to undo 1 deadline's worth of haste. I think about Shackleton's compromise every time I am tempted to rush, every time the deadline is closer than the preparation, every time the announcement has already been made, every time the easier choice is the one that cuts the reinforcement. Because what Shackleton's story quietly shows is that the compromises we make early, the ones we tell ourselves are small, the ones we tell ourselves we can outwork later, do not stay small. They wait for the ice. And when the ice comes, we spend years of our best work trying to undo what an afternoon of haste set in motion. Shackleton paid the debt. He brought every man home. He wrote his name into the top of every leadership textbook. But I wonder sometimes whether he ever wished, on the open boat, on the glacier, on the cliff above Elephant Island, that he had just asked the Norwegian shipyard for the crossbeams. He never said so. Maybe that is part of leadership, too. In March of 2022, a team of engineers found the Endurance. She is 3,008 meters down, in the blackest water on Earth. She is upright. She is intact. The cold has preserved her so perfectly, you can still read the word endurance, arched across her stern. She is protected under the Antarctic Treaty now. No one will ever touch her. And in October of 2025, 110 years after she sank, a Finnish professor laid her blueprints on a desk in Helsinki, compared them to 3 other polar ships of her era, and quietly finished the story. The ice did not take her. A decision made in 8 months of haste took her. And the bravest recovery in the history of exploration was the price of that decision. Somewhere, right now, in a quiet conservation room at a Cambridge College library, a book restorer is lifting the binding off a 16th century volume. She has done this kind of work for 30 years. But today, Under the glue and the paper and the centuries of careful repair, she is beginning to see something she was not expecting. Under the cover of this Tudor-era book is a second, older document, hand-illuminated, in a script that has not been written in 800 years. It is a page from the legend of King Arthur, a page nobody knew had survived, and the story of how it got there and how a routine conservation project became a medieval discovery nobody thought was possible is a different story. We'll tell it soon.